I've been a GNOME user from the day one. I switched to KDE and now I use both Plasma and GNOME. And I love the project because of its maturity, because it's advanced, because it's modern. So today I'm going to talk to Sriram Ramakrishnan, also known as Sri, who has been with this project for almost 20 years now. He says that he joined the project just 4 or 5 months after Miguel announced the project. I actually met Miguel, I think in 2012 or 13 when we lived in Belgium, and I attended FOSDEM. I met him and I interviewed him there, and I will be linking the interview in the links below that you can watch it. And so we are going to talk about the evolution of GNOME project. We are going to talk about the challenges it is facing as the PC market is kind of changing, it's shrinking, and we are seeing the emergence of new app delivery mechanism like Snap, Flatpak, or Snappy Core, or the whole containerized movement which is happening in the enterprise side. And we will also talk about the other things that the GNOME project does beyond developing software. So let's talk to Sri. Yeah, thanks for taking your time to talk to me today about. It's 20 years now, right?
Huh? It's 20 years.
Wow, that's a lot of time. I mean, I started using Linux back in India when I joined Linux for You magazine group as a journalist, and they were using Fedora core, and I hated it. I was a Windows user, so
Yeah.
and I started with, I think, it Mandriva, then Fedora, and then I stuck with GNOME because it was easy to use, and I've been a GNOME user till Unity happened because I was using Ubuntu back then. I used a lot of
Right.
mix of hardware, so Ubuntu just kind of worked fine. And that's when I moved to KDE, and then I stuck to KDE, and then high DPI systems all came in, and GNOME did a good job. Their skills very well with high DPI systems, so
Yeah.
I moved back to
Mhm.
GNOME. And but there's this vicious cycle that every time a new release comes out, it goes back to square one and all those things. And I remember when I was at FOSDEM in 2012, I met Miguel Icaza.
Yeah.
Miguel, yeah, yeah, yeah. So he was like praising what people were doing with the GNOME 3, though he doesn't have anything to do with Linux or open source nowadays. I mean, kind of, but not that much.
He's
So
there. He likes to heart GNOME stuff on Twitter.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So
It's like his baby, kind of. So that was like my brief, kind of history of when I started using GNOME and Linux. But when we look at you, and GNOME has been around for 20 years, how long have you been associated with the GNOME project, and in what capacity?
I started about 6 months after Miguel sent that.
Okay.
Uh,
Wow, really? So you have
so
been.
yeah, it's been almost 20. It's almost been 20 years. Yeah, for
Okay.
me.
S-
um,
mm-hmm.
I started off just on the mailing lists, and then for the longest time. And I took over a project by Christian Schraller, who's
Mm-hmm.
now the Red Hat desktop guy, this week in GNOME or something like that, where I gathered all the metrics for stuff and um, and um, I gathered the metrics and all these CVS. It was CVS back then, and metrics and that was the project I was given when I asked Miguel for something to do. so that's how I started in GNOME, and then onto a GNOME journal project. So I was doing mostly non-technical type work when I was with GNOME for the most part.
Now GNOME has been for so. I mean, KDE was before GNOME, right? GNOME came out because there were a lot of licensing issues regarding the QTs, dual licensing. There are a lot of concerns. That's why I think GNOME came into existence, right? That's why it was created initially, if I'm not wrong.
And so the concern was that as KDE got more popular, that wanted to make sure that we had something that was based on the GPL and was free as in freedom.
Right. I think I lost your audio as well as video there when you were explaining. So I just got, there was a concern around GPL. So that's what all you said, or you said something else also?
I basically said that yeah, there was
Okay.
concern that it was
Hmm.
not based on a free license,
Right, right.
and as KD got more popular, that
Hmm.
it became a greater concern.
Right. So the it evolved, from that concern. And if you look at the whole 20 years of gnome evolution, so initially you were solving a very crucial problem, which was critical problem regarding licensing. But when you see the evolution of GNOME in all those years, what other problems that you saw Linux desktop world was facing that you were trying to solve through all these years, and how many of those problems you think you have solved, and what is still the.
So and this is this is what makes I think GNOME unique is that and I've been putting this out there that we're sort of user space engineers, uh, considering the whole Linux ecosystem, because when we had an underlying principle of just works, right? But basically after 1.4, and when we started 2.0, we sort of said we want something to just work properly, just work by default. And but to do that, we had this concept of draining swamps. And so when we started working up and down the stack. And you know, I remember one poignant moment when you put your CD into the computer and it would recognize it and say, hey, a CD has been detected. Would you like to mount it? It was one of those moments where all of us was like, wow, we're doing something there. Because before in the old days, we would put it in a thing we had to manually mount it from a shell. And so now we're sort of putting these things in place that makes that getting real usability, right? So those were like iconic moments for us as on this path. And so we went off and did other things. Hardware detection was something we wanted to do, and that kind of led to UDev and various other things, uh, and and UDesks and so forth. Uh, so a lot of Gnome's work was both fixing the usability issue, but also again looking outside our of our community and trying to solve problems there as well. You know, Bastion in this area did a lot of work with Bluetooth, for instance, to make that user friendly.
So when you talk about these project, so where does the work of a distribution ends and the work of a desktop environment starts? Because if you look at GNOME stack, you have. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, I can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you look at the GNOME stack, you do a lot of work, but at the same time, when we talk to distributions like OpenSUSE or Ubuntu or Fedora, they also do a
Mhm.
lot of work. So where does the work that distribution does stops and the work of desktop starts? Or do you work together with, because you said you were looking at the Bluetooth problem, but the way I look at it, it is a Linux problem or a distribution problem. So can you kind of
Right. So, I think we're still having active conversations about that, about where the desktop ends and where the distro ends. And in at Guadec, Richard had Richard Brown and Sousa had a really nice talk about from a distro perspective of where the problems with moving to we're talking from a distro centric to a developer centric, uh, and distros see themselves as the gateway for quality, right? They are the ones you know that helps make the experience. And but the argument we're I guess is saying is scalability. maybe you can do that now, but if we, there's markets like Android that have millions. We can't, you can't scale to that kind of level. And so, if you want to grow beyond where we are, then we have to seriously look at where where is the right point between that, and that's what we're trying to have conversations in. And you know, and having Richard there was great because, there are things he's correct about, and we do need to focus and think about. And so, hopefully, we will continue having that ongoing conversation
Right.
to see where one ends and where the other starts.
Right. One more thing is, I mean, you said that distributions are kind of gateways, but you can also look at them depending on that they are kind of gatekeepers, and when you see all this evolution of Docker containers, a lot of incumbents, they get worried because now they are losing that control, because when you talk about distribution or operating system, they actually control the whole stack from top to bottom. But with containers, that owner, that control gets broken, that's totally so distribution do feel some kind of threat there when you look at those models. And that's why some distributions, like Canonical, they do have stakes in Snappy, so they are happy about it. But some distribution who do not have, they initially were worried. Now SUSE, they have a CASP platform, so now they are okay with containers. Red Hat has your Atomic project. Now, if you look at this evolution, and if you look at distribution and desktop world, I mean, the whole idea is, first of all, I don't think anybody uses an operating system. I use an application, I use a word processor to create my stories, or I need a music player, So, okay, I have to get this hardware, then I have to install this operating system, then I have to install this desktop environment just to use these three applications. It's too much overhead, workload. That can be simplified. So if you look at the traditional model of distribution, then desktop environment, and then to be able to run that one application, do you think that with the way we are moving towards containers, though actually containers are not for every use case. Now you don't need an IP address with every single application on your system as Docker offers, or a lot of other things. But it does break, dependency on a lot of underneath overload that you have to run just to run one application. So from GNOME's perspective, where your goal from, I have been a GNOME user, is to make it easier for people to consume computing power. To get you with the GNOME 3, you remove everything out of the way, and all you do is just focus on the work and get it done. There is no unnecessary overload. So from your perspective, where do you see GNOME heading, or where do you see the Linux distribution world is heading when all this transformation is happening in the enterprise world?
So yeah, I mean, I think there are two different spaces. I'm sure you can use Docker within an application, but Docker runs from a root level versus,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, Flatpak. And I can't comment on Snappy. I don't know its internals that much at all. But Flatpak runs from user space, and so you have a much finer granularity of control over what it accesses, right? So with Flatpak, we using a manifest, we say, okay, we want access to this part of the hard drive. We want access to the Wayland display system, things like that. That's much harder to do from a container point of view. So I don't think they're in the same problem spaces. And containers definitely have their uses, especially when it comes to continuous integration and various other things. But in the space we're doing in terms of applications,
Okay, let
I
me.
think
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I did not make. I mean, when I said container, I did not mean to use, as I gave example. That not every application need an IP address. So by when I gave example containers, what basically I meant was that, I mean, that a lot of things that happen in the consumer or desktop community work get influenced from the work that happens in the enterprise world. Linux, okay, Torvalds created it for his own purpose, but the reason Linux became so popular was company like Red Hat, SUSE, or Canonical, they built it for enterprise. That's how it trickles down. Otherwise, the salary of all those people will not even come. So when I said containers, I basically meant, that this is the influence that is happening, and with snap Flatpak, we are seeing same kind of. So my question was that just the way they have found a solution in the enterprise world, where you don't have to worry about the underneath layer. You just you're created a container image, and you can run on any cloud that you want. There is a so similar model can. I'm not saying that you will be running containers on the desktop, though a lot of people are saying KDE is bundling a lot of things as containers. But what I'm saying is that what influence do you see from container world that can be adopted in the desktop world, so that we move it towards this? Because what happens with the container world, once again, not container in the, I'm just talking the influence, not the same model, is that you package an application, it's immediately available in for every distribution, no matter what it is. That's what you can do with Flatpak or Snappy or App Image. But what I'm saying is how to further simplify the whole hegemony of distribution and desktop environment and application. Why not just make it simple so people just run the application? So what I'm saying is that, do you see any influence coming from that transformation that is happening in the enterprise world, where the desktop world may change or may evolve in future, or you think that it will remain the way it is?
Um, I'm not sure. Let me dial back. You're saying the question is what things have happened in enterprise Linux.
I'm losing your voice. I think I've lost you for a second.
It seems like.
I think I'm
Can you
losing
hear
you.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you. The moment you start saying something, I kind of lost you there. Let me see. Can you try now?
I don't know how to fix it. Is it
Yeah.
timing? No, I can hear you just fine now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. Can I just give it one more try? Because I
Okay.
think the problem is with my question. I think, okay, what I'm saying is that we are seeing a transformation, a transition in the enterprise world, where we are moving. Though company like Red Hat are still fighting against the Docker movement, but we are seeing a transformation where just the way VMware changed the whole data center landscape, with
Sure.
virtual machines.
Sure.
Similarly, we are saying
Virtualized.
something. Yeah, we are seeing something similar where it's becoming cloud native applications are there, where you don't have to worry about where you're running the application. And it's also cutting, but the desktop world is totally different, because you're dealing with a lot of hardware, you're dealing with different kind of components that are plugged in. Containers don't deal with a lot of things. But what I'm saying is, do you see any influence from the container world to the desktop world, where you see that actually that does make a lot of sense, that instead of having this whole overload or overhead of 20 GB or 30 GB of operating system to run a 500 MB of application, when we'll let's say GNOME 5.x, not 3.x but 5.x, do you see any evolution, or we'll be still in the same phase?
So okay, so I will say I don't think there is that kind of influence. I guess if you're talking like for instance from the realm, you're looking at from ubiquitous apps, right? More than anything else, and I would say that we're probably more influenced by application frameworks inside, let's say, a browser, right? That has much more where now we don't care what the OS is at all, much less about anything. So for us, that's a bit of a danger in the sense that if you're trying to spread free software, and people are targeting um, Electron, for instance, as a thing, because that's ubiquitous apps, right? You can target Electron, and then and your audience is so much greater than it would be if it was just Linux, right?
Mm-hmm.
So or Windows or whatever else. I guess so. I guess I'm turning that question around and not precisely answering it, but this is where I see where things like Flatpak and all that that we have to address is web based apps, because that is more of a I guess of a threat for us because we are losing our influence otherwise. I mean, if you look at all the other places Enterprise Linux has probably run most sectors. I mean, today, if you look at Microsoft, things like that, as there are all these frameworks, they're all targeting Linux, but not in consumer space. And that's why I don't see that much of an interaction precisely from the space because our vector of attack is more of these web frameworks based on Chrome and so forth. So hopefully I answered that
Right.
uh, a little better.
Okay, but more question when we are talking about the threat from web. Okay, it depends on different people. For example, I'm giving my example, right? The only reason I use my PC or my laptop is when I have to write or do some research. Okay, beyond that I do not use my computer for anything. I mean, if I have to watch a movie, I mostly watch on my VR or my Xbox or PlayStation or Nintendo's,
Hmm.
whatever it is. If I
Hmm.
have to play game, I play games there. When I listen to music, I use the Chromecast, and I typically stream it there and I listen to music there.
Hmm.
uh, what other things? I don't even know when was the last time I logged into Netflix on my laptop to
Hmm.
to 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 watch a movie there. I don't consume any content on my laptop, and if you look at the decline of PC market, we are heading in that same direction. Because a lot of people, they are just using the tablets or smartphones or other devices,
Right.
for consumption, which also means that PC is kind of becoming a niche for people who really need it for productivity, who want to not consume but create content. Though I'm also aware of a lot of people from the open source world. They still use a lot of things on their web browser. Even they do a lot of things at a terminal, but
Hmm.
that's not the mass market is heading. Mass market is heading in that direction, which also means that PC market is shrinking. At the same time, it's becoming a niche, at the same time very very expensive market. That's why Microsoft and Apple, and Dell, they are coming with all-in-one expensive systems to cater to those professionals. So as the PC market is evolving, changing, which may also create some opportunity for Linux, because you cannot target those desktop users, but you can target these professionals because they are buying PCs
Yes, that's
to
right.
to 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 do the thing. So from that perspective, at the market change, what do you think? How GNOME is trying to address that market, or do you agree with my assumption,
So
or
I'll give my yeah. So I'll give my personal take on it because GNOME is filled with many people with different ideas. But let's say from my perspective, uh, what where I would say GNOME wants to target, and I say this because I built a conference around this whole idea of where we want to position GNOME, and where I would like to see it is I'd like to see us kind of go for the developers desktop or market because that is okay. So she's talking about content creation, but also it's an alignment, right? Again, going back to how a lot of Linux being used today is used in many sectors like IoT or various other places, but it's sort of it's disharmonized. You like a lot of people will do all their work on a Windows platform and then move to a Linux platform, and if we could shove that into the same, but our problems are our tooling is not as good as it could be. So we have, back in the 2.0 days, we were talking about draining swamps. Again, I'll come back here. The swamp that needs to be drained is to fix and improve our tooling and create the kind of tools that are sophisticated enough to attract people to the platform and continue and address the idea of content creation, not just content, but also creating better source code, and that's where Builder is a big effort in that. So, but we don't have everything, right? If you're talking, let's say like social media or some other kind of thing, we don't have sophisticated uh, 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 things for that, and that's because again we're going back. We don't have things to build applications. So that's kind of my take on where I would go as a start, because trying to take on the entire consumer market is not going to work. It is
No.
too large of a problem, but we do have opportunities to do that from a professional slash code development angle vector, as a vector of attack.
Right. I mean, on top of that, the consumer market itself is shrinking, so that market is not going to remain either way for a very long
It's
time.
been diffused, right?
Yeah.
It's going out into a sort of the web and various other places, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
As you were
these
saying.
devices, I monitor and cover virtual reality and mixed reality a lot. And
Mhm.
the way I see computing is going, we won't. I mean, I actually hate the whole idea of sitting in front of a monitor, looking at monitor at you, and not being able to see. I would very much, want mixed reality to come, so I can wear my, VR goggles, where I can see everything, and it's actually very interesting word where you just imagine that I'm wearing the goggle, which is like transparent, not this looks funnier than whatever goggle is. And then I'm chatting to you on virtual a screen. I open a small window here, I'm talking to you, looking there, doing my work, and I am walking, and I have a virtual keyboard, I can type things there. And
Mhm.
I mean, the whole surrounding I can open a doc file which is floating in the air, and I'm talking, I mean, writing my document on a 300 inches huge doc file instead of staring at the computer.
Right.
And this is the word that we're heading to with once the Apple iPhone 8 is out. We will move in that direction. So computing is the way changing. But that is once again consumption. Creation we will still be using, I mean, okay, interface may change,
Right.
user interface may change, but you will still need computing power. So that is two areas. One you said thread was from web, and second is the professional market that is kind of PCs catering. Now I was talking to Richard Brown at OpenSUSE conference, and when I asked that now what happened is you can install a Linux distributions minus the kernel within Windows with WSL. So essentially I can do almost everything from DD. I can burn a, I mean, I cannot, because I cannot do LSBLK or DD, but other than that I can SSH into things, I can rsync things, so I can do everything that I do on my Linux system within Windows. And I also use Mac OS, and Mac OS is Unix. So I do everything that I do on a Linux system on Mac. Initially I did not know, but and some things are actually better on Mac than on Linux. No offenses. Um, Plus, I can access Photoshop. I can access whatever I want. So when we look at these two platforms, where you have Mac, and that's why when you go to OpenStack Summit, DockerCon, wherever you go, all you see is Macs, because it's. And then I talked to a lot of people, and they said the reason they use Mac is that the support and repair is very easy. They have to just call Apple and get replacement of, for instead of dealing with 20 different vendors and having a whole sysadmins to manage your systems. One, it's quite easy. So one point you have Mac OS, which is Unix, and then one end you have Windows, which is now baking in all the Linux features. So why would people even bother with Linux? And when I asked Richard Brown, I said, "Do you see it as a threat or as an opportunity?" He says, that OpenSUSE is evolving. It's no more a distribution anymore. Distribution is one of our projects. We do OpenSUSE, we do OBS, we do a lot of different things. So we don't really care much if people are using a distribution, as long as people use the Linux utilities and tools that we have created. And with Windows, the way I see is that suddenly the those billions of Windows users, they have access to the Linux utilities that they did not have access before,
Right.
which can be
Right.
seen both ways, either as a threat. So what is because now your case is different, because you are a desktop person,
Right.
and you cannot, I cannot use GNOME, in the WSL. So how do you see it, as a threat or a possible opportunity?
Ah, well, that's a good question, and I guess my initial response is I see it as a threat from a free software perspective because if you're trying to spread free software, you're sort of now moving to non-free platforms to get the same, I guess, experience, so to speak, from at least from a CLI perspective. So if your mission is to spread free software, I see that as a possible threat. Now, how would we mitigate something like that? I guess really comes down to, I guess I would say communities being one. I mean, even in these other OSs, people want to belong to a community. I mean, they're things form that way. And the greatest thing we could say is as an attractor, or at least for the GNOME platform, is that you're that if you have these values, we have these values, and they're very humanistic. One of the greatest uh, advantages of saying free software is that it is a social movement. It is a political movement, and so we can always say that we have these values, and that to be part of this community, to be part of GNOME, is something that aligns to from very humanistic values, and so I guess I wouldn't say technology is always going to be one side will always be superior to the other, but the differences that separates us is always going to be community and our values, and that's how I would do an outreach of that sort, is from that perspective.
Right, right. Uh, I mean, yes, what you're saying, it does make sense, but you also know that there has always been a clear divide between free software people who use a platform for ideological reasons, at the same time, uh, kind of open source people who use it because of the superiority of the technology. So
Right.
yeah.
Open source provides an economy of scale, and at the price, it's a social contract that we're going to give up some amount of control in order to attract people who work on our platform or our application, and so forth.
Hmm.
Um, but it doesn't have the I guess the social and political aspects
I
that
know
free software provides.
the big the
Right.
yeah the big
So,
yeah, please continue.
but that open source is not married to any technological anything, right? It's just a methodology that can be applied
Right.
uh, in
It, yeah.
any operating system or concept or anything, right? Uh, so that's one difference with the bridge between open source and free software.
Right.
uh, and so they would not see uh, you know uh, a Linux subsystem on Windows or OS X as a threat at all, right? As
Yeah.
I would see it as a threat.
Yeah, I understand. Now that leads to
That'd be
another,
my
yeah, that leads to another interesting question, and the question is that what is actually important that people be able to use computing power to get work done, or people, even if that means they are not able to do a lot of things, but it is free software. So what is more important, our as a human civilization, our ability to use the tools that takes us to the next phase of human civilization for our evolution, irrespective of what tools are, because we live in a society, we live in the US, which has a lot of political problems there. Every country has a problems, but we kind of make some compromises, and but the most important thing is that, okay, we are like HP is about to send a supercomputer in space, so we have possibility of this world where we go and explore other planets. We try to find the cure of diseases. We I mean, try to find who we are, where we, at one, irrespective of what tools are at our disposal. At other hand, we have no, we will only use free software, even if that means that we cannot even open a web browser to watch a movie, or do a lot of things. So when I look at it, I always see this conflict, because as a science fiction writer, I see. So when you do talk about the free software or open source, I do sometimes feel that it's missing the actual value, or the actual ideology, that we should move forward, but here I see the focus is more on technology and ideology than where we should go. How do you maintain that balance? And if we stick to that, we will never move forward.
Well, the so I guess you could see from our own actions, at least, that we are moving forward. I mean, we were trying to fix the software distribution. I mean, there's still a very technological sense of drive, right? Especially if your end goal is to say spread free software, or as I said, at least it provides the momentum required to push the technological service changes we want. If we can't get, some things are maybe hard for us to deal with from an ideological perspective, especially if you're talking about licensing for MP3 or things like that, and we get around that somehow, right?
Yeah, MP3
uh,
is out of patents now, so anyone can use those. The patents for MP3 expired this year, so anybody's
Right,
using.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
And immediately, we were able to incorporate that, or we have created other codecs that, things, you know, because ultimately we want this to be free. Uh, but I do feel that free software is that motivator to drive that technological thing, even if it's deficient, right? For instance, we there's a lot of things we don't do very well, and casual entertainment is not something we do very well, right? you know because, for instance, you're talking about Chromecast or things like that. We don't those are non-free platforms, and we don't do those kind of things. But a lot of us make pragmatic decisions on where that line is between free software and open source all the time. I know I certainly do. A lot of times I do use non-free stuff, and when it makes sense. I try to use free when I can, but sometimes there's just a juxtaposition. I don't want to go to that level to
Right, right,
get what I want, right?
right.
So I do use a Chromecast, right?
Right, right. Yeah, that's my point. To use, as I cook a lot, and when I talk to Linux people, and by Linux people I mean the desktop people, I say I don't use the pizza pan to make chicken curry. I have different utensils for different things, so that's why I use different platforms. So there are a
Right.
lot of areas where Linux, does excellent work. There are a lot where it doesn't. There are a lot of areas where, I mean, I don't even use Microsoft Windows because I cannot trust it because of the privacy issue, and it does not fit in my workflow. I need those virtual desktops. I need Unix tool set to do a lot of things. So Mac OS and Linux are my platforms. Though I do run Windows because I don't want to be biased. I don't want so that I have my opinion is not biased by my own usage. It's practical. But what I do see here is that just the way it's important to go to Mars, at the same time it's also important to feed the hungry. It's also important to build an education system which is kind of affordable. So
Great.
so when I look at free software from your perspective, the way I see it is that it's the same thing here. That's just moving forward to Mars is as important as ensuring that the things that you do on Mars, you do as a free human being, not as a product of a company that sent you to that planet.
Mhm.
So if you don't have the tools, you don't have the platforms, you don't have the, what will you do? So okay, if it even if it is not taking you to Mars, but when you do reach Mars, you still have those tools which will
Right.
still allow you to. So I think different things do have different purposes. Everything will not solve the same problem. Did I kind of explain it properly, or?
I sort of understand what you're trying to say.
I
I
think
guess.
both are important. Free software is,
Yeah.
yeah. What I'm trying to say is from what I get from you is that, okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, I was expecting that answer from you actually. That that yes, we because I think free software, people often say that okay, open source is pragmatic, but free software is too, because if you do not have that very basic framework of tools that allow you to remain a free human being, it doesn't really matter whether you are in Mars or at some planet 1,000 miles from here. So who is going to do that work? So somebody has to do it. So that's what the free software ideology is. And at the same time, I also feel that continue to work on free software will because things change. Our ideology change, our things. So at
Yeah,
least we will have something ready.
sure. What may have been okay 10 years ago from a society point of view is not the same today. We nobody's ever nothing is ever static.
No.
Everything always moves forward, and let's say from my perspective here is I'm trying to build. I mean, I personally am trying to build an application ecosystem because even though I'm literally inviting non-free software to come because we're trying to build this platform, and we're not being ideologically pure saying only free software, right? We want to invite non-free or anything else because at the very least we should be able to have it on a free platform that you can trust and has all those things that are part of our free software movement. um, but so everything is like sort of a negotiation. I hope you understand what I'm saying here, but
I understand.
it's
Yeah.
I'm not saying we have to be purely ideological in every sense of the word in every stage, and there are certainly people who do believe that, but I personally don't believe that, and that everything is sort of a compromise
Mm-hmm.
uh, as we go forward, and
Right.
we take what we can get,
Right. I mean,
right?
I'm writing a
Pretty
science
much
fiction which is about your Elon Musk. He's taking people to Mars. When I mean, so when you move to Mars, and um so what will happen is I mean, I'm just giving you a rough plot about it. The people who move to Mars, the healthcare is very important. So
right.
now there's only one vendor who will be serving. It could be Musk's company, or they can sign up some deal with some pharma company. But it's called, the term is called pharmacogenetics, where based on your genetic makeup you get that treatment. You
Right.
know, so as the population of Mars will increase, there will be a kind of epidemic, where people will be so, and then the term of engineer and doctors will merge. So right now it's also happening, where if you're an engineer building a scanner for Philips, which helps detecting cancer cells, you know, but you don't know anything about medical science, and you are a doctor surgeon who wants to be able to see those things, so you have to come together to explain to everybody. So there will be a new form of new field, medical engineers, who will doctors, and they will be the same people, because you so the thing is, since it will be offered by the same company, and the company run out of resources, so there will be like these kind of medical engineers who cannot help their own family members, because everything is DRM'd, everything is copyrighted, and they don't have the, and even if you can break it, they don't have the tools because they are illegal. So if there is no free, I mean, even if you want, there is nothing. So you do want the alternatives which you guys free software people create. So
Hmm.
so the whole idea is they will find a colony in a space where people, I mean, I will use the name Richard and Brian Bellendorf and all those people, who will be like kind of either you call hackers or whatever you call. So they have built their own medical facility, and they will take their daughter there to cure it. So it will be about how, why free software is important. So these kind of setups, that okay, you don't see the value right now, but if you need it, where is it?
It's
So it's
yeah,
continue to
it,
to
it
to invest
provides a
in.
contrast
Yes.
between what's going on there from a corporation point of view and from a community point of view that
Yes. Yeah.
has a more humanistic type of idea, right?
Right.
Versus free capitalistic practices. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I get what you're saying there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Before we
and
wrap up, yeah, please continue. How much time do you have?
How much time I have? I'm free for
Okay.
a little while longer.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to
You
do it too
want
long so people can at
great?
least sit and listen. uh, we talked about the software part of the, we talked about, the computing word, but GNOME is also a GNOME Foundation, right?
Hmm.
So when we look at GNOME Foundation, are you associated, I mean, how different is the GNOME project from the GNOME Foundation?
So the GNOME Foundation is essentially handles the political, the money, the fundraising, and trademarks, those kind of things for the project, right? So the foundation handles things like somebody using the GNOME foot, somewhere uh, without asking for permission. It funds hackfests or hackathons or sprints or whatever you want to call them to drive particular features or bug fixes, those kind of things. Occasionally, we'll get some kind of drama where we have to defend our trademarks,
Mm-hmm.
which has occurred. So we just manage these the plumbing around
Mm-hmm.
the project. We don't really we're not really in the foundation is not really involved in technical direction of the
Right.
project, and that was built in from the very beginning because the confluence of like fundraising and various other things could it's very tempting to
Yes.
try to influence the project during those things like that, and so we wanted to make sure that
Right.
we're not tempted that
Right.
way.
Uh,
So
if I'm not wrong, GNOME Foundation also does, the outreachy program is there, is still part of GNOME Foundation, or it has become the outreachy?
which one? Oh, the outreachy program. No, it's been moved to Software Freedom
Right, right.
Conservancy.
Yeah, because I
They're
talked to Karen Sandler last time, and
yeah,
but the thing is, the project, kind of started and evolved at GNOME. Then it moved
right.
out, and recently GNOME Foundation also released a statement regarding the travel ban by the Trump administration. So which
Right.
was like criticized by a lot of people. I was kind of shocked to see such criticism because um, uh, the thing is, these days everything is political because politicians get involved with everything.
Right.
The open internet is a political issue. If you don't want to talk about political issues, stop talking about open internet. DRM is a political issue because there is a law. So the moment you build the laws around it, and the moment you discuss in Senate, it's a political issue.
Right.
Similarly, surveillance or encryption or every single thing is a political issue these days, or it's about very very personal matter, which is who I want to marry. That has
Sure.
become, it should be a very very personal issue, a
Yeah.
private issue. Same time, whether I'm allowed to travel to a country to contribute to the project I like or not, that's also very
Right.
personal. So and GNOME Foundation, since it's not regional, it's a global organization, and you have
Exactly.
contributors from all around the globe. I mean, your
Right.
founder comes from South American country, right? He's
Mexico
yeah, Mexican.
found it.
So if you
Yeah.
Trump builds a wall, he cannot even come here to. I'm just joking there. He's not going to build a wall. He doesn't have money.
He's already here.
Yeah. But a lot of development happens in Europe. A lot of development happen in different countries. So
Yeah.
so I think that statement was, and that kind of statement should come out from tech companies. What's your take on when GNOME Foundation get involved in these? Can you really separate politics from technology these days, or you just really cannot?
Um. You know. And the foundation, and it's probably more appropriate for them to do it. But I'll give you my
Mm-hmm.
personal take on this. And there's some things worth being political on, especially if we feel that, or I believe it is a barrier to the mission, right? Everything we have a mission, and if we in
Let
the
me
like
just
the
let
travel
my
ban.
cat out. He's crying. You can continue to talk. Go, Yoda. Go, go, go. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, he
No
was.
problem.
Yeah, yeah.
So, um, so getting involved in politics it can be a dangerous exercise, and so if it's very narrow and pointed and supports our mission of creating a free desktop or spreading free software, then that's worth doing. Like with the travel ban, if our community members are not free to wander around the globe, then that makes it problematic for us to hold conferences or hackfests or anything else. And it's a barrier to creating free software.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, I would say I postulate that would be what was behind the reasoning for that
Mm-hmm.
particular
Right.
release. And again, I was not involved in that. So
Mm-hmm.
but where GNOME or any other software project gets involved in politics is again should be part of supporting a underlying credo. So
Right.
and but and there's lots of political things you can be part of, but if you get involved too much, you will create distraction.
Right.
Then more, and our main job is to support the GNOME project and continue building a great desktop
Right.
and company ecosystem.
Right, right.
So
I'm pretty sure that, for example, let's say if the federal government overthrows the whole open source movement, it started by Obama, where federal employees have to contribute that much source code, and it bans use of open source software. Then I'm pretty sure that GNOME Foundation will get involved because it's not about politics, pure politics. It's involving the technology and open source. So I think those kind of involvement makes sense. and
yeah.
and I think, yeah, Richard Stallman, started the free software movement. He should start a free movement so people can move around.
And he sort of did, right? We had
Yeah,
the Creative Commons and
yeah,
various other things. It just sort of, there's been a lot of things that have been inspired by the free software
right,
movement. Creative
exactly.
Commons and Wikipedia. These are
Mm-hmm.
all things that,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, you know, are had sort of come from the free software movement.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, Richard Stallman has started something that is important and continues to be.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, when we live in Belgium, he stayed with us for a while, and I have very understanding of, and I met him in India in 2009. I spent 3 days with him, so to understand what kind of person he is. So he's very interesting. He taught me how to make pasta, and then we experimented how to make breadcrumbs in the oven.
yeah,
So that was fun.
right,
And I'll
yeah.
be interviewing him soon. So yeah, he's doing a lot of nice work these days. But the whole market is changing. Open source has kind of become a norm, so it's no more main thing as it used to be once. But it's open source, not.
And there's really nothing wrong with that. The where free software and open source thing, it's still open source. It's still, it may not have the social and political ramifications to it, but it's still moving towards openness. And so, where open source and free software can agree, it's great that we agree.
Right, right.
And where it doesn't, we will keep communications open and have conversations.
Yeah, I mean they're
You know,
serving same purpose for different people, and different people have different requirements. So the way you serve them
well,
changes.
I've been on both sides, so
Yeah,
I know.
yeah, same here. Yeah.
So,
Now, yeah. Anything else that you think that we should talk about in this 20 years of Gnome?
well, I, the recent things with Flatpak and thing is sort of interesting because there is again a cultural shift that we're pursuing, right? We I think we pushed our cultural shift when we were going through in the 2.0 thing, right? At the end of that cultural shift, you saw the integration of designers with developers sharing I guess ideas with each other on a piece of software, right? We built a new kind of interaction model that probably wasn't seen before. I wanted to call that out specifically, given our 20-year history. And now in the next generation, now we're trying to move towards building a marketable ecosystem, application ecosystem, so that we can start building scale, right? Now that we have the scale, now that we're pursuing scale, we'll be able to bring a wider variety of applications that were not there before. Maybe some we can inspire to be free software. A lot of them will be non-free. That's all great. And so, but the ability to be able to have um, conversations between developers and users is something I like to see. Uh, so moving forward, that cultural shift is going to be important, but it will probably create a lot of um, friction between versus. So you might be seeing some of these conversations that might create frictions, especially with those who really love and enjoy the traditional Unix model, or a traditional either from the old Unix model days or during the distro model, and so uh, you, as we should make that. Hopefully, as we continue to talk about making that shift, uh, uh, we'll be able to get over some of these roadmaps. Sorry, barriers.
Right.
And- but ultimately, we in our next phase, we want to build an ecosystem that's scalable, and continue to refine our user experience within the platform. And the other big job we have is really looking, and this is something I ranted about at Quadec, is fixing the developer experience and making sure that good developer documentation exists, good
Right.
and a support network that doesn't isn't overly reliant on IRC or some of the old traditional
Right.
models of support that we've seen. So we want to change some of those things as well.
Yeah, yeah,
So
because you have just raised one point, and that I would like to conclude with that point, and that is that one thing that I like about GNOME is that like the software update mechanism, and a lot. I'm talking about very user perspective, not technical or develop. That people they use the software center there, which is GNOME. So it doesn't matter whether you're using Arch Linux or OpenSUSE or GNOME Ubuntu. You get the same experience across distribution. Earlier, it was totally different experience in one way or the other. That is one great thing. So when we look at Flatpak kind of experience, and I was talking earlier that desktop is becoming a niche which will be used by professionals. So if GNOME does push Flatpak kind of app ecosystem across distributions, it will lower the barrier even for commercial vendors. I mean, I do a lot of 3D printing, and a lot of 3D printing software from Autodesk is available for CentOS and Red Hat, uh, from Autodesk and a lot of other players also.
mhm.
Uh, but as I said, for CentOS, and you cannot do it for Ubuntu or OpenSUSE or whatever. But once you really push Flatpak there, that it will lower the barrier for those people to make their applications available for Linux in the sense wholesale Linux, not a particular distribution. So do you think that Flatpak will help you there as well? And GNOME can help because you guys have really created a kind of experience where people can
Yeah, I believe so. And there's one aspect that we don't talk, and Ox will probably kill me, but the interesting idea is, one of the I find interesting ideas about Flatpak is the targeting of runtimes versus a distro, right? And right now we're very focused on the desktop experience, But one point I like to make to people who are in DevOps or anything else is, if you're targeting your tools and you're creating tools, you start doing it with and targeting a runtime, then and I think uh, like Arch Linux shows it. Kind of shows how you could do this, right? You start like there are forces, and we're trying to apply the distro model to runtime type of thing, and I've seen pieces of that. But if you're targeting that way, then um, uh, it'll I suspect it might end up kind of like the Docker registry type of thing, right? You
Mm-hmm.
download a runtime and all this other thing. But when you target your tools, that means your underneath OS layer can be changed underneath it, right? So that means one of the things I had in my last with my last employer was that we had built all these tools, and they targeted a enterprise Linux of maybe 10 years ago, and they were unable to upgrade to the next one because all these tools still existed, and nobody had the resources to port it to the next one. So you just sort of stop progress of upgrading because your tools won't upgrade with you.
Right,
And
right.
so if you were able to port to a sort of a subsystem level, then you'll be able to upgrade underneath it. So there's some very practical. It doesn't actually involve GNOME at all,
Mm-hmm.
but those are not part of our um, what we're doing today at
Right.
all. But something one could think about later, and I say that simply as a bullet point, that GNOME is more just than just a desktop project.
Mm-hmm.
It's user space engineering. We are engineering our user space,
Right.
and so we're worth looking at simply from that perspective.
Right. Okay. One last question. There's always a last question, right? Now,
I'm creating more.
yeah. Ubuntu is, the most popular distribution, not
Yes,
only
yes, it
among
is.
casual user, but also developers and sysadmins, and in the cloud, on public cloud, it's one of the most widely used distribution. But no, Ubuntu ditched GNOME with Unity, and so that was also a big loss for GNOME, because you lost, one of the biggest. Now Ubuntu is going back to GNOME with the next release. At the same time, we are getting Flatpak, but Ubuntu have Snappy, but Snappy, I think they may keep it for the server and IoT side. And then you have all this, kind of vision, that, the way Flatpak can help professionals, and developers to get, and it may also lower the barrier. You have all these good ideas, and you have the technology ready now with, Flatpak, and suddenly you have one of the biggest players, Ubuntu, which is coming back to GNOME. So how do you see this is going to play out, in favor of GNOME? Because now suddenly you have the influence on the market through Ubuntu, and you have good ideas, how to. I mean, GNOME has always been known for, to simplify the whole user experience, so people just focus on getting the work done. So how do you see it's going to play out for GNOME and Linux? No, not Flatpak. And what I'm saying is that you have a very good combination now. Ubuntu, GNOME, you guys have developed a lot of systems, like software, and then Flatpak is ready, and then which also means that you are less dependent on the underneath distribution, because at GNOME level itself, people can do a lot of things irrespective of. I mean, I manage a lot of my software on Arch Linux through GNOME software, though of course I don't do R and everything that I have to do there, but so 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 you have baked in all these cool technologies which will help user, and suddenly you're about to get a massive user base. So what I'm saying is the influence that you have built within GNOME will suddenly be accessible to all these millions and millions of people. So how do you see is going to work out for GNOME? because people don't talk much about it. But when I look at it, I see, oh, that's going to be really massive.
So when everything was announced, we saw definitely interest, people who now want to write GNOME software or write extensions. So we have a bit of trying to scale, right? Is sometimes because we have such a renewed interest. But on top of that, there's a lot of hardware manufacturers, laptop produce desktop manufacturers who are using Ubuntu as their default, who are also quite interested in what um, what GNOME is doing, right? So what we're seeing here is a confluence of various hardware manufacturers, users, and um, I want to say corporations, but uh, who now have a renewed focus on GNOME. So GNOME's GNOME's challenge is to be able to work with all these entities, especially when it comes to everybody has an idea what our design is going to be like and how to create that user experience, right? So the Ubuntu community team was there at Guadec, and so we had a lot of conversations of what makes sense. So so for designers, there's going to be a lot of focus on them about what they would accept and what not accept, and from my perspective anyway. And same thing with the internals of GNOME Shell. So I think the future is going to look very interesting for GNOME going forward with this. And there again, there's certain things that we need to do to get ahead of this this, which is improving our documentation, continuing to work on our user experience, and really learning to take in a lot more voices than for the last 5 years. We've been pretty much doing it on our own, but now we're going to have much more stakeholders,
Right.
and that will prove to be an interesting challenge for all of them. And to some extent, that's happening. The GNOME design team has been working a lot with Endless design team. And so I think I don't see this as a big problem at all. And